We are talking about how to find joy in conflict. It is such a good topic. I am excited about this because conflict is inevitable. Everybody has their own thoughts and their own view. And you know what? We don't see eye to eye on everything, from family, friends, acquaintances, so many different platforms too. Government, schools, there's so many different things. And I'm so excited that we're talking about this today because the Lord has a lot to say about this topic.
Yes, he does. There's a lot of the Bible is full of conflict resolution.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Think of all the stories that are in the Bible about this and what God does with that. But one of the big things that I thought of was some of the questions like, how does he want us to live in difficult situations? What does that look like? And I was digging into some scriptures. I had some in my mind, but I was digging into some and wow, it's just so clear and so plain. One of the biggest things I saw, Bethany, that was so clear to me was to be peacemakers. You look at the Sermon on the Mount and what Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. That's from Matthew 5:9. I mean, it says it right there. And another reference is 1 Thessalonians 5:13. Be at peace among yourselves. I have two more. Romans 12:16. Live in harmony with one another. And Romans 14:19. Pursue what makes for peace and for mutual upbuilding. Okay, if we all live this way, wouldn't it be a peaceful world? I mean, think about
Yes.
it. But how hard is it? Because what are the things that get in our way? I think about pride. I think about it's got to be fair. And there's so many things that we have in our makeup. And yeah, I don't want to hog all the fun here. I know there's so many things to this episode. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I honestly think you're absolutely right. It comes right down to our pride and putting ourselves first in a conflict. And generally, when you look at relationships, there are always unspoken expectations, right?
Mm,
And when that person doesn't meet that unspoken, a lot of times it's unspoken, sometimes it's a spoken expectation, but I think oftentimes it's an unspoken expectation and they don't meet it, and then there's disappointment,
mm,
and then there's resentment that can build over time, and the lines of communication can get, you know, severed.
mm.
So, I think it really does boil down to not putting others first, which it's hard because that means you're dying to your wants and your needs and your expectations, right, Carol? Oh,
Yeah. Yeah,
that's
you're
hard.
thinking about, we're to die to self, and that phrase has been talked about. And that way you're dying to the flesh and you're living for Jesus, Christ in you, right? Christ in you, Christ
Mhm.
through you is another phrase that I use. And I tell you, if you let the flesh drive you through your difficult situations, it's going to be conflict. It's going to be strife. It's going to be unpleasant.
And hard. All your relationships will be very difficult. And I struggle with this, Carol. I I'm number 1 when it comes to hard conflicts. I am super competitive.
Mm,
And that comes out not just in, like, fun and games and all that. It comes out in my personal relationships with pretty much close family. And if I had a husband, it would probably be with him. But I sometimes want the last word, and that is so just disrespectful to others, the other people in my life, and not putting them first. It's very prideful.
mhm.
And there's another thing, Carol. Why do we treat the people that love us the most, that love us unconditionally, why do we treat them the worst?
Boy, that's a loaded question.
Right. I mean, all of us can examine our personal relationships right now. I would say interpersonal relationships, like the people that are closest to us. How do you treat them versus a stranger at the grocery store that you bump into by accident with your cart or, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry."
Yeah, that is so true.
And then if and then what if our kid does it or our husband does it, like, it's totally a different, like, and those are the people, honestly, the people outside your family are the people that you're not gonna see them across the dinner table tonight, or you're not gonna spend, you know we had a big family. So growing up, we had 1 bathroom and there was 4 of us, of which 3 of them were girls. And
Mm,
so hair, makeup, all and I remember there was, most Sundays were a little harried getting out the door.
I can imagine.
So, I'm sure people are thinking as you're going to church, you've all yelled at each other in the morning or had words or no words because body language can be just as loud as actual yelling. The
Oh,
cold shoulder or not acknowledging somebody, that's hard too.
no, I hear you, and I'm in the same boat. Oh my gosh. It's like that ugly head is reared, the ugly pride or fairness,
Mhm.
but, it's so ugly, and I don't know why it happens, but it does, and over the years, I'm happy to say I've subdued it somewhat. I have tools that I use that I was gonna
Mhm.
share today, but yeah, it still happens. I mean, especially and we've talked about this, road situations when you're driving and you're like, "Why? Why do people do the things
Mhm.
they do?" It's like, it just doesn't that can really get to me. But one thing I love this verse, Proverbs 13:10, it's so true to how we are. It speaks to pride exactly. It reads, "Pride only breeds quarrels." I mean, it's so
Mhm.
plain, and I love that about Solomon. It's like he was the wisest man in the Bible, and he speaks so plainly, and these proverbs are so rich in value. And I just think when I read this, and I was gonna say, I think about situations, and one of the things that I have learned is we take it personally, right? And we use
Mhm.
we live in the flesh rather than what would Jesus do? I still use that. I don't think it's a cliche. What would Jesus do? I mean, it is a really good question to ask. And
I was actually thinking the same question when I was doing some studying up on this
yeah,
topic. Back to what would Jesus do?
exactly. And one of the tools that I use is if I am getting up in arms or I am like getting up, I know something's affecting me and somebody's ticking me off. It's like, don't respond, walk away, never respond when you're angry in that angry moment. Wait until your brain is thinking logically and not in that anger mode. It comes back to self control. So we have the spirit in us if we, focus, just let the spirit work through us. When we realize it's like more and more when you go through these episodes or these events that happen with people or things, you can just know, okay, I am not at peace right now. I have to stop and just, go and pray. That's the second thing is pray about it and wait on the Lord for direction. Time will help you see it, if it is something that, you need to act on or, because some things you don't need to act on. Sometimes self examination too is really helpful because it might be about yourself. You might find something like, oh, you know, maybe that was really something I did, or wow, I wasn't very kind in that moment or whatever it looks like. But those are just some things that I have learned from my experiences.
So I was gonna talk a little bit about this book that I read a while ago, because sometimes books can be very helpful in a relationship. Some relationship books. My old church, my pastor used to do a relationship study every year right after Easter. It was just something that we did as a church. They did a topical study on the DNA of relationships by Gary Smalley, which is a
Mm,
fantastic book if you're looking for some tools. He talks about how we react to disagreements or conflict stems from usually our pain, our fear, our insecurities.
Mm.
So, if you can peel back all the layers of your personal life, of you, because that's all we can change, right, Carol? We can't change other people. God says we have to change ourselves.
Right.
So, when we learn about ourselves and we can kind of dissect, why do I react this way? And the beautiful thing, or the horrible thing, about people that are close to us and love us is that they know how to push the right button to get you to react.
Mm.
And sometimes people are looking for a reaction. They just want you to blow up, or I think I can say this. Our family, I would say it's an Italian, Swedish, Norwegian family, which you would think that would be the opposite because we're stoic. I mean, that nationality is
Mm.
usually more stoic than loud, but our particular family is more loud, and we really we debate and we get into. And I say my mom always calls it um, conflict, or what does she always say? Strife. She always called it strife. But I think sometimes it does go that way, but I don't think that's where we start. And my sister-in-law, she came into our family a few years back, and she said she just told us this recently, so it's really interesting to hear that. She said, "I had no idea how you guys communicate as a family." And she said, m you would be in the car talking to your brother, and it would get heated. Like, it would be me and him because we're very strong personalities. And you would get he'd get off the phone with you, and she would be like, "Oh, that was intense," and my brother's like, "Oh, it's fine. I love her. She's good. We're good." And she was just it was really hard for her to, like she's like, "But you just got really upset at each other." He's like, "No, that was just our communication," and it's kinda true, that's how our family has always been. So, my backstory is when I moved out at 20, I grew up with that, right? I used to come home and pick a fight with whoever it was. It was picking a fight because I didn't realize that, but when I moved out, my body and my brain and my psyche was so used to that that I there was like this there was like this gap I was missing. When I boiled it all down, I was actually missing the connection with my family. I'd moved away. We were very close. We would have these discussions around the dinner table and all that. But sometimes I think it turned, it's a slippery slope. It's a fine line between, conversations that aren't going to hurt people and conversations that actually do.
Mm.
And sometimes when you are more of a heated conversational people, like our family was, there's like someone may come out of that conversation and be hurt.
Sure.
So I think I was missing that, which was interesting because my mom made a comment. She's like, Bethany, you come home and you always leave angry and upset. And I did. And I remember one time I was driving home and God just spoke to me and he said, Bethany, why are why are you doing this? You love these people. They love you. And you're always so upset with them. And I would always leave in a huff. I mean, I remember this. And when I got away from the situation and I was able to evaluate my life, and I was young, I was in my 20s, but God showed me when I was in that, it wasn't a healthy thing that I was missing. Does that make sense, Carol?
Mhm.
It wasn't that isn't a healthy way to live life in conflict and get all like boiled up and everything. And so I purposely in my heart decided I was not going to do that anymore. I would go home, I would enjoy their company. If we started getting heated, I would resolve it and I would leave. I was not going to leave the house, my parents' house, after a visit in a huff.
Mm.
And I just purposely put like I said, God, I don't want to do this anymore. You're right. I love these people. These people love me. And I realized, no, you're not going to win on this. You need to stop. You need to surrender. And this is not part of your life anymore. And after I did that, I honestly, Carol, I love harmony. I love to have a good debate, but I just love the harmony that I chose. And again, did my family change? I don't think so. That we still have some heated disagreements. But now I've changed. I've taken a different route. So I know that's kind of like a little backstory, but the DNA of relationships talks about the fear dance and how when you're in conflict with someone that you know well, it's usually a spouse, children, parent, something like that, a sibling. They know you well, and so they'll push your buttons.
Mm.
And then you push their buttons. And so it's like this dance that you go, and it's kind of a rut, and you get in a rut and you continue the you might even have really similar fights, which you fight about the same things,
Mm.
or every fight goes back to us like a point where you're like, "Oh, we always have this fight." So if you realize that in your conflict that you're having with people right now, analyze what does the fight go the same way? Or does it always take a different route, but it comes back to the same middle? Then you have to change something up. And the only person that can change it is you. And
Well,
that's
right.
just the self
I love
evaluation.
that. I think that's really wise. And I do believe that when you say the only person that can change it is you, I think absolutely. And what's the next step? What does God say? Right? Like, what does
Mhm.
He lead us
Well
to do? Right? And I have to share this because I love this. It just sums up really well. And, we're talking about how to have joy in these situations, right? And we've talked
mhm,
about different verses on how to rejoice during, difficult times. I mean, we've talked about Philippians, don't be anxious. Instead, bring your requests to God with thanksgiving, right? Like be thankful.
mhm.
Um, and this one from First Thessalonians reads, rejoice always, pray without ceasing. In everything, give thanks, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. And I love this part, do not quench the spirit. It's like conflict quenches
Mhm,
the spirit. Do not
mhm.
quench the spirit. Do not despise prophetic utterances, but examine everything carefully. Hold fast to that which is good. That's another rich one. Abstain from every form of evil. And that again was First Thessalonians 5:16 through 22. So it's really rich with everything. It's kind of a tool to deal with conflict. This is how, or more like, this is how we should be when we have difficult times with people, difficult situations, things that we don't like that we're seeing in the world. It's all of these things. It's like pray without ceasing, hold fast to that which is good. I know for myself, I look back at what is the truth, okay? You know, I Jesus is with me all the time. He's going to see me through every situation. And when it comes to the tools I mentioned earlier, to walk away, Jesus did that with the Pharisees. He's like, I'm not putting up with this, like, those are my words. Okay.
Mhm, mhm,
But I
mhm,
mean, he saw it was fruitless for them to, talk to him or ask him questions about things. And, there are times in the Bible where he just walked away. And I, I think that's a really good example for us to walk away when things are just not fruitful, or we're needing time to just process, or we're needing time to cool down. And so yeah, it's definitely us. We have to take that action, and then it's where are we turning to get wisdom, to deal with those situations. I totally see that.
I think you also need to look at how the other person how they deal with conflict. So, I like the walk away, but for me, that is really hard, for someone to walk away from the middle of a conversation that might be too much for the other person to handle.
Hmm.
So, being, um being aware of the other person, remember, we're always talking about being kind and putting the other person first.
Hmm.
So if you know that the person that you love, is it's too much for them, giving as me, the one that wants to keep the relation like, to keep the conversation going and not end until you know, we've made up or dealt with the conflict, it's been resolved. Resolution, that's the one.
Yeah.
Giving the other person and I need to practice this. I'm talking about it right now, and I'm going, "Oh, I need to do this with my mom." 'Cause she's the my first she likes to she if it gets too heated, she walks away, and that's so hard for me because I want to resolve it, and when she walks away, often that feels like rejection to me, which again, I'm dealing with the deep, deep stuff, how I made up and whatever hurt or stuff that's happened in the past, that is a huge botherance to me, but when I see her walk away, I'm practicing this. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I say, "Okay, mom, if we don't talk about it right now, when is there a time we can talk about this maybe the following day? Can we have dinner? Can we go out for ice cream? Can we do something and actually talk about this when we're not heated?" I've been practicing that because that is difficult for me, but I have no problem with walking away and I'm looking for the resolution. And sometimes when a disagreement is not resolved, it leads to another disagreement down the road over the same things and
Mhm.
having the same fight. Does that make sense?
Yes,
And
totally makes
so
sense.
for me, it's like, okay, how can we resolve this so that in a month and a half, when this pops up again, I have the tools in which to say, hey, we talked about this and remember we were going to do this. And I
Mhm,
need to do this for you, and you said you would do this for me.
mhm,
So, it's all about, okay, 1, knowing yourself,
mhm,
knowing how you fight, learning how I think they call it fair fighting or conflict resolution, and knowing and understanding your partner and the person that you're in the relationship with. Now, it can be a child, it can
mhm,
be, a parent like I'm dealing with, it could be your spouse.
mhm,
Whatever, it could be a friend,
mhm.
um, but whatever that is, trying to understand, put yourself in the other person's shoes. The other thing I was gonna tell you, Carol.
Hold on, hold on. That's
Oh,
huge what you just said. That is huge. I can relate to that, and one really cool thing that I was in a class and I learned, it's like, number 1, you can't control other people and you don't know what they're going through. So if somebody
mhm,
walks by you and they used to be all nice and bubbly and always said hello and all of a sudden they ignore you, you take it as they're ignoring you. It's not, don't take it personal. It could be something they're going through. Maybe they're dealing with
mhm,
something really heavy in their life. So that is
mhm.
one thing that has really helped me, especially coming from used to being a people pleaser and it's like, "Well, I want to please everyone, and ooh, why are they all uppity against me today? It's like, no, so that's something that it's a good takeaway, I think. It's helped me a lot. So I just wanna interject that.
No, that's great. And this is another piece. I don't want people there might be somebody who's being taken advantage in a relationship as far as someone is maybe abusive. We're not talking about that, those kind of conflicts. If someone is physically or verbally abusing you, I don't think I know, God does not want you to take that. And so that then I would tell you, you might need an outside source to show you what's happening in I'm thinking of more of a marriage situation. So, if someone is belittling you and tearing you down on purpose, I don't God doesn't want that. We're more talking about in this scenario interpersonal conflicts that you have within,
Mhm,
a coworker situation, child, parent to child, child to parent. If there's something bigger and maybe you can't see it and you're saying, well, I don't have this relationship and this isn't and I think even at times, if you're an older adult, parents can be abusive in a way, even when you're older too. So you have to, I don't want to go down that road, Carol, but I want to say you might need an outside source. I'm thinking a Christian counselor that can kind of walk you through what is going on with your relationships if there's something that's really toxic. Thinking of a toxic relationship. That's the word I was looking for. Because there are toxic relationships, and I don't feel like you need to live in that. I'm not saying you divorce your husband. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying you need help to know how to navigate and
Mhm.
how to bridge that divide if that is because
Or your pastor.
Mhm. Or a small group leader, a friend, a Christian
Mhm.
friend that can come alongside you and you can have a confidant, you can have someone that you can talk to, that can pray with you through those things because it's interesting. Can I share a little bit more about this book? And then I wanna read something else. I've This topic was it's so good, Carol. I'm just
No, go ahead.
it just really brings a lot of joy to me as we were talking, and only because I feel like I just wanna help people. So, our church tagline, my church in the when I lived, in my old town, it was, "Life is relationships, the rest are just details." And that was our tagline, our kind of our motto for our church. I did not realize it came from this book from DNA of Relationships, which makes sense because we spoke on this a lot. Everything in life that truly matters can be boiled down to relationships. Isn't that interesting? And I wanna just give you little snippets of this book because I think if I give enough, you're all gonna wanna go out and buy it and read it, and it will hopefully help your relationships. But the relationship DNA code is made up of 3 simple yet profound strands. You are made for relationships. God created us for relationship. Isn't that great, Carol? He made us that we want to be in relationship. And ultimately, it's with our Father.
Mhm.
The relationship is between he and between him and you. You are made with the capacity to choose. So you can choose, right? Who you decide to pair up with in your life or your marriage. You don't get to choose your parents. God puts you in your family. So that is something that is actually unchangeable. And you are made to take responsibility for yourself. So that is your inner, like, that's what I was talking about before, was knowing who you are and taking responsibility for, this is how I want to resolve conflict. I don't want to leave, but I know that my mom in this situation, she can't do that. So having extending grace to her and letting her be her, and knowing, saying my piece, saying, "Hey, this doesn't work for me, but we need to reschedule this argument," basically, or this disagreement, and knowing where your boundaries are and where her boundary is. I also thought about this, they mentioned this, and it kinda goes about taking on responsibility. When we look at Adam and Eve in the garden, God spoke to Adam first, and Adam blames Eve, Eve blames the serpent. All of the blame, neither one of them took responsibility. Eve could have said, "You're right, I ate it and I gave it to Adam." What if I always want this is my what ifs. I just wonder this so much, Carol. What if Adam had said, "Yes, I sinned. I ate the fruit." I What would have happened? Would
Hmm.
they still have been cast out? I don't Probably, but I wonder if
I don't know.
the curse would have been different. It just shows to me how how selfish we are, even though, I mean, he really liked hanging out with Eve. They hung out probably a long time. They were probably really good friends. I don't know. It's just interesting to think about that.
Yes, it
Um,
is. And I wanna just interject
mhm,
along with what you're saying is you said it a while back, but we can choose our reaction. And this
mhm.
ultimately can give us joy or it can steal our joy in life. So,
So true.
back to that point about we have a choice. We control if we're going to have strife or peace. Stay tuned for part 2 of how to find joy in conflict.